Be the light unto yourself, Appo Deepo Bhava. Lately, I've started noticing how much of my peace depends on things I cannot control. A conversation going well. Someone staying. A plan unfolding the way I hoped. And when life changes, even slightly, something inside me tightens as though the ground itself has shifted beneath my feet. Maybe you felt this too. That quiet exhaustion of trying to hold everything together, while your mind keeps searching for certainty in a world that never stops changing. But what if peace was never meant to come from controlling life? What if the Buddha was pointing towards something far more intimate? A light that does not disappear when circumstances do. Tonight, I want to explore that quiet teaching with you. Not as philosophy to believe, but as something we can observe together through ordinary human experience. Through restlessness, attachment, fear, and the strange freedom that begins when we stop demanding permanence from life. This is Appo Deepo Bhava. Be the light unto yourself. The quiet search. There are moments when you look around your life and realize how much of your peace has been placed into the hands of changing things. A message arriving at the right time, a relationship remaining warm, a plan unfolding exactly as imagined. You tell yourself that calm will come after the uncertainty passes, after the next achievement, after the next reassurance. Yet even when life briefly settles, another wave quietly forms beneath the surface. The Buddha saw this movement clearly, not as failure, but as the natural habit of a restless mind searching for permanence in what cannot remain still. You feel it in small ways every day. The tension in your chest while waiting for someone's reply. The subtle disappointment when a good moment ends. The quiet fear that without constant effort, life may slip beyond your control. And so the mind keeps reaching outward, hoping the world will finally provide the stability it cannot guarantee. But what if the peace you seek was never hidden inside changing conditions? What if the light you have been searching for was meant to be discovered much closer, beneath the noise of striving itself? The Buddha's invitation was never to escape life. It was to learn how to stand inside it without being carried away by every passing storm. And perhaps, even now, some part of you already understands this. The weight of becoming. Much of human exhaustion comes from trying to become someone else. A calmer person, a wiser person, a more successful version of yourself standing somewhere in the future. The mind creates an image and then quietly suffers beneath the distance between who you are and who you think you should be. The Buddha observed how deeply this struggle shapes human life. We build identities the way children build houses from sand near the edge of the sea. For a moment they appear solid, then the tide returns, a criticism arrives. A relationship changes, age touches the body, plans collapse without warning. And suddenly the self we depended upon begins to tremble. You can see this in ordinary moments. A parent believing their worth depends entirely on being needed. A worker tying identity to achievement. Someone trying so hard to appear spiritually calm that they become frightened of their own sadness. Even the desire to become enlightened can quietly turn into another form of grasping. Like a tree pulling desperately against the wind, the mind becomes tired from resisting what naturally changes. Yet the Buddha did not teach self-rejection. He taught observation. To notice that thoughts, emotions, roles, and identities move like weather across the sky of awareness. Present for a time, then gone. And when you stop clinging so tightly to every passing shape, something softer begins to appear beneath the effort of becoming. A lamp in the dark. The mind becomes clear not by controlling the river, but by learning how to sit beside its movement without fear. There is a particular loneliness many people carry without speaking about it. The feeling that no matter how much advice is gathered, no one can fully walk your inner path for you. Others may guide, comfort, or inspire, but eventually you are left alone with your own mind, your own reactions, your own suffering. The Buddha understood this deeply. Near the end of his life, he encouraged his followers to become a light unto themselves, not through isolation or pride, but through direct seeing. He pointed away from dependence on authority and toward careful awareness of experience itself. You begin to understand this slowly in your own life. Someone gives wise advice, yet anger still rises inside you. You read calming words, yet fear continues moving through the body. Knowledge alone cannot free the mind. Understanding must become lived. Like lighting a small lamp during a power outage, awareness does not remove the darkness all at once. It simply allows you to see clearly enough for the next step. A woman sitting quietly before dawn notices how anxiety begins each morning, as a tightening in the stomach before thoughts even appear. A man caught in frustration suddenly recognizes that his suffering comes less from the situation itself and more from demanding that reality behave differently. These moments seem small, yet this is how inner light begins. Not through dramatic transformation, but through honest observation repeated gently over time. The river that cannot be held. You suffer whenever you ask life to remain what it was. The Buddha saw impermanence everywhere, not as punishment, but as the basic movement of existence itself. Breath enters and leaves, seasons shift, bodies age, relationships evolve. Even joy changes shape the moment you try to hold it still. And yet the mind continues resisting this truth in countless subtle ways. You revisit old conversations hoping to preserve who someone once was. You replay memories because they feel safer than uncertainty. You become attached not only to pleasure but to familiar pain. Even suffering can feel comforting when it forms part of your identity. Imagine trying to hold river water tightly in your hands. The harder you grip, the faster it slips through your fingers. But when your palms soften, the water can rest there briefly before continuing its journey. This is the strange wisdom the Buddha pointed toward. Peace does not arise from freezing life into permanence. Peace appears when resistance softens enough to move with change instead of against it. You see this in nature constantly. Trees release leaves without argument. Waves rise and disappear without mourning their shape. The sky never struggles to keep yesterday's clouds. And slowly, through quiet observation, you begin learning the same intelligence within yourself. Restlessness and noise. Modern life trains the mind to fear silence. The moment discomfort appears, distraction arrives to cover it. A screen, a conversation, endless information, constant movement. Many people live surrounded by noise because stillness threatens to reveal what has been avoided for years. The Buddha understood that restlessness is not merely physical. It is the mind's refusal to remain present with itself. Beneath endless activity, there is often a quiet unease. A sense that something important is missing, though few can name exactly what. You may notice how difficult it can feel to simply sit without reaching for stimulation. Within seconds, the mind searches for escape. Plans arise, memories return. Fantasies appear, regrets begin speaking. It becomes clear that distraction is not solving inner tension, it is temporarily hiding it. A pond disturbed by constant wind cannot reflect the moon clearly. Only when movement settles does reflection become possible. This is why the Buddha valued stillness so deeply, not as withdrawal from life, but as a way of seeing life more honestly. In silence, hidden fears become visible, unfinished grief surfaces gently. Desire reveals its endless appetite. But alongside these discoveries comes something unexpected. You also begin noticing the spaces between thoughts. Small moments where awareness exists without struggle. And in those quiet openings, the light within becomes easier to recognize. The trap of spiritual identity. A peaceful appearance is not the same as a peaceful heart. Even the search for wisdom can become another form of attachment. The Buddha warned gently against turning spiritual practice into identity. The mind is remarkably skilled at using even noble things to strengthen the illusion of self. Someone begins meditating and quietly becomes proud of being calm. Another speaks constantly about mindfulness while remaining deeply impatient with others. A person chases purity so intensely that they begin rejecting ordinary human emotions altogether. This creates a hidden tension. Instead of freedom, spirituality becomes performance. You may notice this in yourself sometimes, the wish to appear evolved, the disappointment when anger returns after moments of clarity, the subtle belief that awakening should remove all difficulty from human life. Yet the Buddha never pointed toward becoming superhuman. He pointed toward becoming honest. Clouds do not apologize for crossing the sky. Rain does not pretend to be sunlight. Nature allows movement without turning it into identity. In the same way, awareness allows emotions to arise without becoming trapped inside them. Sadness can appear without becoming my permanent sadness. Fear can move through the body without defining who you are. The light within is not created by perfection. It appears when pretense begins to fall away. And often, the deepest peace arrives not when you become extraordinary, but when you stop struggling to become someone else entirely. Sitting beside suffering. Many people spend years fighting their pain without ever truly listening to it. The Buddha approached suffering differently. He did not deny it, dramatize it, or treat it as personal failure. He simply invited careful observation. What is this experience made of? How does it move? What happens when resistance softens, even slightly? This changes everything. A difficult emotion often becomes heavier when combined with fear, shame, or avoidance. Anger grows stronger when the mind insists it should not exist. Loneliness deepens when covered with distraction. Anxiety tightens when imagined futures are treated as certainty. But something unexpected happens when awareness sits beside suffering without immediately trying to escape. Its structure becomes visible. You notice how emotions rise in waves, how thoughts feed sensations, how identity forms around temporary experiences. A woman grieving the end of a relationship realizes that beneath heartbreak lies a deeper fear of being abandoned by life itself. A man consumed by stress discovers that much of his exhaustion comes from carrying impossible expectations about who he must be. Like muddy water left undisturbed, the mind slowly begins clearing on its own when constant interference stops. This does not mean suffering disappears instantly. The Buddha never promised that. But through understanding, suffering loses its power to completely possess you. And that gentle shift changes the direction of an entire life. The middle way of effort. There is a kind of effort that creates more suffering than ease. The Buddha noticed how human beings often swing between extremes. Forcing and collapsing, obsession and avoidance, discipline and exhaustion. One moment the mind demands perfection. The next it abandons itself entirely. Neither brings peace. Imagine pulling a stringed instrument too tightly. The string snaps. Leave it too loose and no music emerges. Wisdom lives in balance, in the quiet intelligence of enough. You may recognize this imbalance in ordinary life. Someone pushes relentlessly towards success until joy disappears from their days. Another avoids responsibility completely in the name of freedom. Even inner work can become harsh striving disguised as growth. The Buddha called attention to a gentler kind of effort. Not forcing life into submission, but aligning carefully with reality. Like a gardener tending soil instead of pulling flowers open by hand. Growth happens through conditions. Rest matters, patience matters, compassion matters, awareness matters. A person learning meditation discovers that trying too hard creates more mental noise. Another finds that healing begins only after they stop treating themselves like a problem to solve. This is the middle way in lived experience. Not passive, not aggressive, just deeply attentive. And within that balanced attention, the inner light grows steadier, less dependent on mood, success, or external approval. The space between thoughts. Freedom begins quietly, in the moment you realize you do not have to follow every thought that appears. For many people, thoughts feel completely personal and completely true. A fearful thought arrives, and the body reacts as though danger is already present. A painful memory appears, and identity immediately forms around it. The mind speaks constantly, yet rarely pauses long enough to question its own stories. The Buddha observed this carefully. He saw thoughts not as commands, but as passing mental events. Temporary movements appearing within awareness like birds crossing an open sky. This realization can feel surprisingly liberating. You begin noticing how often suffering is created not by life itself, but by the mind's endless commentary about life. The argument replayed for hours, the imagined future catastrophe. The comparison that quietly steals contentment from the present moment. A man walking home after work suddenly notices that his anxiety exists almost entirely. Inside imagined conversations that have not happened. A woman sitting beneath a tree realizes there are brief spaces between thoughts where nothing is missing at all. Those moments matter. Like sunlight breaking through clouds, awareness becomes visible in the gaps. The Buddha did not ask people to destroy thought. He invited them to see thoughts clearly enough that they no longer ruled the heart completely. And when identification loosens, even briefly, life begins feeling lighter. Not because circumstances changed overnight, but because consciousness itself became less crowded with struggle. Returning to the body. The mind often lives everywhere except where life is actually happening. It travels into memory, projection, regret, fantasy, comparison. Meanwhile, the body remains quietly present, breathing beneath all the noise, waiting patiently for attention to return. The Buddha frequently guided people back toward direct experience through the body. not because the body is perfect or permanent, but because it anchors awareness in reality instead of imagination. You notice this when walking slowly without rushing toward the next moment. The sensation of feet touching the ground, air entering the lungs, warm sunlight resting on skin. Ordinary experiences become vivid once attention stops fleeing elsewhere. Many forms of suffering weaken when awareness reconnects with the body. Anxiety often lives in imagined futures. Shame survives through repetitive mental storytelling. But breathing happens only now. Like roots grounding a tree during strong winds, bodily awareness steadies the mind during emotional turbulence. A mother washing dishes after a difficult day pauses long enough to feel warm water moving across her hands. A student overwhelmed by uncertainty notices tension softening slightly after several conscious breaths. Nothing dramatic changes externally, yet inwardly, space begins opening. The Buddha understood that awakening does not happen somewhere outside daily life. It appears within ordinary moments observed clearly. Within breathing, walking, listening, resting. The light within is rarely discovered through escape from the present moment. It is discovered through complete arrival into it. Compassion without possession. Love becomes painful when mixed with ownership. The Buddha recognized that much human suffering grows from confusing care with control. You want loved ones to remain safe, consistent, emotionally available, permanently close. And while these desires are deeply human, they often carry hidden attachment beneath them. You see this clearly when relationships change. A friendship slowly drifts apart. A child grows independent. Someone you love becomes emotionally distant. The pain is not only about loss itself. It is also about the mind insisting life should have remained different. Yet compassion rooted in awareness moves differently. Like sunlight touching all things without trying to possess them, mature love allows space for change. It cares deeply without demanding permanence. This does not make relationships cold, it makes them freer. A father begins understanding that guiding his daughter is different from controlling her path. A partner realizes that listening gently creates more connection than constant attempts to fix another person's emotions. Someone grieving a loss discovers that love continues even after physical presence disappears. The Buddha never taught detachment as emotional numbness. He taught freedom from clinging. And strangely, when grasping softens, compassion often deepens. Because fear loosens. Because presence becomes more important than possession. Because the heart no longer needs life to stay frozen in order to remain open. The freedom of not knowing. The wise mind does not demand certainty from a changing world. Human beings often search for certainty because uncertainty feels vulnerable. You want guarantees about relationships, health, purpose, and the future. The mind believes that if everything could simply become predictable, peace would finally arrive. But life does not move that way. The Buddha observed that insecurity becomes stronger when the mind fights against uncertainty instead of understanding it. Much anxiety grows from demanding answers that reality cannot honestly provide. You can feel this tension whenever the future becomes unclear, the urge to overthink, to predict every outcome, to control conversations before they happen. Yet despite all this mental effort, life still unfolds according to countless conditions beyond personal control. Like trying to calm the ocean by arranging individual waves, the attempt itself creates exhaustion. But something changes when uncertainty is no longer treated as an enemy. A woman facing career change realizes she does not need to know her entire future to take one honest step forward. A man sitting beside illness discovers moments of genuine peace inside circumstances he once believed would destroy him. The Buddha's wisdom was deeply practical. He pointed toward stability that does not depend on certainty. Awareness itself remains present whether conditions feel secure or unstable. And when you stop demanding permanent guarantees from an impermanent world, a quieter confidence begins to emerge. Not certainty, but trust. A trust rooted in presence rather than prediction. The lantern already burning. For much of life, people search outside themselves for permission to rest, heal, or feel complete. They wait for recognition, achievement, or transformation before allowing themselves peace. Yet the Buddha continually pointed inward. Not toward isolation, but toward direct knowing. The phrase, "be the light unto yourself," does not mean becoming self-sufficient in a cold or separate way. It means learning to trust awareness itself more deeply than the changing stories of fear, comparison, or desire. You begin recognizing this light in subtle moments. The quiet clarity that appears before reaction takes over. The inner voice that senses when something is untrue. The awareness that notices suffering while also remaining larger than it. A person sitting alone after heartbreak realizes that although grief moves through the heart, awareness itself remains untouched beneath the waves. Another discovers that even during confusion, there is still a silent presence capable of observing confusion clearly. Like a lantern covered for years beneath layers of dust, inner wisdom was never completely absent. Only obscured. The Buddha did not give people truth as possession. He encouraged them to discover it directly within lived experience. And perhaps this is why genuine peace feels less like acquiring something new, and more like remembering something ancient that was quietly waiting beneath all the noise. Walking gently through the world. Awareness eventually changes the way you move through ordinary life. Not through dramatic declarations or spiritual performance, but through quieter shifts. You listen more carefully, you react less impulsively. You begin noticing how much suffering comes from unnecessary resistance. The Buddha's teaching was never separate from daily living. Wisdom appears in conversations, in traffic, in loneliness, in moments of irritation, in how you speak to yourself after making mistakes. A tree does not force shade. Yet anyone resting beneath it receives comfort naturally. In the same way, inner clarity quietly affects the world around you. A calmer presence softens conflict. Honest listening eases another person's loneliness. Patience interrupts cycles of anger that once seemed automatic. You may still experience sadness, uncertainty, frustration, or loss. The Buddha never promised immunity from being human. But suffering no longer needs to dominate consciousness in the same way. Because now there is space around experience. Like the open sky surrounding changing weather. You begin understanding that freedom is not somewhere far away waiting at the end of perfect conditions. It exists in the simple ability to meet life without constant grasping, to breathe without rushing, to care without possessing, to act without becoming trapped inside identity, and to walk gently through this temporary world while fully aware of its changing nature. The light that remains. When the mind stops demanding permanence from life, a deeper peace quietly begins to appear. Perhaps this is the realization the Buddha hoped people would discover for themselves. That freedom does not arrive through controlling every condition, not through becoming flawless, not through escaping uncertainty, but through seeing clearly. You begin noticing how suffering softens whenever awareness replaces unconscious reaction. How peace appears naturally when grasping loosens. How identity becomes lighter when no longer treated as fixed and permanent. Life continues changing, of course. Bodies age, relationships shift, plans dissolve. Joy comes and goes like sunlight moving across water. Yet something inside becomes less frightened by this movement. Because the light you depended upon was never meant to come entirely from outside yourself. It lives in careful observation, in presence, in compassion, in the quiet courage to remain awake within an impermanent world. Like a candle lighting another candle without losing its own flame. The Buddha's insight continues through direct experience each time awareness meets life honestly. And perhaps tonight, after all the striving and noise settle for a moment, you may sense this for yourself. Not as belief, not as philosophy, but as a quiet inner recognition already waiting beneath the surface of your own awareness. This is Buddha Reflections, where philosophy, insight, and lived experience meet to explore mind, impermanence, and release. The conversation doesn't end here. Visit the quiz tab and share your score in the comments. Thanks for your time, it's been a delight. What should we explore next? Comment, share, and save your insight. Subscribe to Orbital Dharma and keep your thoughts bright.